Let's see, can y'all do a quick test post in the LinkedIn um, comment channel just to make sure that works correctly? Just so this is how we're going to take questions.
Hey, Yujan, how's it going?
Hey, David, how's it going?
Good, good. It's
Awesome.
fun to be here.
Yeah. Um, all right. Well, yeah, thanks everyone for joining. And yeah, so the topic of today's conversation is going to be how do we think FDA is doing in terms of um, yeah, are they doing a good job in regulating AI medical devices? Um, is that right, David? That was the topic that we chose?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, do we feel FDA is doing a
Yeah.
good job regulating AI and medical devices? What could they do better?
Cool, cool. Yeah, so the format of these, what we're going to do is, yeah, for the first like 15, 20 minutes or so, we'll just chat, kind of give our thoughts on the topic, share any insights, screen share any things we want to. And while we speak about this, it'd be great if the audience could start typing in their questions into the LinkedIn channel. And at the end of this conversation, we will then um, pick the questions that we have and try our best to answer them. So yeah, with no further ado, let's get started. Um, Maybe just a quick round of self introductions. Yes, my name is Yujan Shrestha, the CEO and partner of Analytics. I have a background in biomedical engineering and also I have an MD. I've been in the medical device space for about 13 years. And the team is we have 19 full-time employees. A lot of them are software engineers that have regulatory experience, and we also have regulatory consultants that have the software experience. And we help our clients build software and get it FDA cleared. David?
Great. Yeah, I'm David Giese. I studied biomedical engineering. Actually, Yujan and I met at UT Austin a long time ago. I then went to pursue a PhD at Boston University. I left that to start analytics when I realized I didn't like hardware and I wanted to focus more on software. So then really worked in software development for about 10 years before moving more in the FDA regulatory direction. And these days, I'm still doing some regulatory consulting, but I'm doing a lot of operations and sales for analytics. So I'm excited to be here.
Cool. Cool. Well, let's start out. I think the first step in any sort of scholarly discussion is to define terms, right? Like it might not be the most interesting, but I think it's I think it's really important to have on the to kind of be on the same footing. So, David, when you ask the question, is FDA like how well of a job is FDA doing? Um, how would we define, or I guess like how do we set a target for what does it mean to be doing a good job?
Yeah. Yeah. So like what, okay, so in the ideal case, like from a regulatory standpoint, what's the ideal situation? So I would say it's the effort for the companies submitting the devices or doing whatever they have to do is very easy, like as easy as possible. Like no effort would be the ideal, the limiting case. Like there's no extra effort. Just install this app and it reads your code and just says you're cleared without any, that would be like the ideal, right? The next is that they do make a perfect decision. Like anything where the risk benefit analysis is correct, it always clears it perfectly. And if it's the risk benefit isn't there, it doesn't. um, and right, so if that's like the ideal that we're shooting towards, I guess like how good of a job they're doing is like how close are they getting to that ideal. I'm trying to think if there's other parameters besides just the effort and in the final like risk benefit. And I guess the risk benefit's tied to the indication. So there's always the like, hey, maybe for a different indication, the risk benefits there. But Yeah,
So you're saying that it needs to be low effort and have a high risk benefit ratio?
or there high accuracy in clearing devices based on the risk benefit. So um,
Okay. So high accuracy clearing devices based on risk benefit. Okay, so I'm gonna ask, what do you mean by accuracy?
by accuracy, just like any diagnostic test, like if
Oh, okay.
right,
So
like
so so you're talking like AUC, sensitivity, specificity. Oh, okay.
yeah, accuracy, like every single time one gets submitted where the risk benefit, like the benefits outweigh the risk for patients, it always is cleared every time, and every time the benefits do not outweigh the risk for that indication, it is not cleared with, because right now that's not the case, right? There are
Gotcha.
devices that they clear where they probably shouldn't have, but and then there's also devices that they don't clear that they probably should. So um
Yeah, this one definitely goes very deep. Um, I think if you kept digging, you would run into some uncomfortable conversations about like the value of a human life and other things. Um, Let me add a couple more, I think. I think one is not too fast or not too slow. And it might be saying the same thing you're saying. Like I think when there's too much regulation, then you'll have devices that get cleared too slowly. And that is also a risk and harm to patients and ultimately a harm to society at large, right? Too fast, you have the same thing. Um, I think it's the job of the agency to ensure that it's not going too fast or too slow, and it also ties into the risk benefit. But I think this is another layer to it, like the speed aspect of it um, as well. So too fast would result in unsafe devices. Too slow would result in patients not getting the not getting treatment. Yeah,
so
it's like when you have clinical trials, sometimes they end early. Like if there's such a large effect or there's such a large benefit that's seen, sometimes they'll end clinical trials early because they'll say that moving forward with the clinical trial is actually a harm because we know it works so well. So like that's kind of another but that's kind of what I thought about. Like I think the EU, for example, like I've heard that the EU and uh, lots of people are also felt this, just kind of seeing how much uh, work we have from the EU coming to the States because MDR is just kind of such a big mess right now. I think they may have overcorrected too far in the opposite direction. So I think that's an example where it's probably too slow, and the net result is that medical device manufacturers are coming to the States first instead and are not even bothering to get it cleared in the EU. So like patients are definitely suffering because of that. Um, I'm not sure of an example of going too fast, but um, uh, I'm sure if we look at some of the missteps that maybe first started the EU moving from the MDD to MDR, maybe the MDD was moving too fast. That it's possible. Um,
yeah,
so okay,
I think that
yeah, it's okay.
like when you think about like how does the FDA make a decision about a particular device, clearly they need clinical evidence to make that decision. And like in for new technologies, it's also it's a random variable, like we just don't know. Yeah, that's a better way, to say it. Least burdensome approach. Like it's not going to be
Yeah,
like in the ideal case, the least burdensome would be zero effort, zero burden, but
yeah,
but I think because it's not known, like it's without gathering more evidence, you can't be that perfectly accurate. The like too fast, too slow is kind of like how much evidence do you need before you can make a decision. So in a way, like the least burdensome and high accuracy, it's too idealized. If those are just the two things, like you really have for it to be useful model reality, you'd have to
Yeah.
break high accuracy into a whole bunch of sub items that take into account the fact that a lot of data is needed to make the decision.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So maybe for the purpose of this conversation, maybe we can focus on the recent elements from FDA that um, tends to speed up uh, um, the process, right? Because I think the easy thing for FDA would just be let's just regulate everything heavily and just make sure nothing gets out, right? So like that, maybe that's like the natural state, and maybe it's a more productive conversation not to talk about uh, how is the FDA going to the natural state, but maybe like what risks are they taking to speed up the process that is going away from that natural state. Um, I don't know. Do you think that's a
Yeah,
good way to drive this conversation forward?
yeah, absolutely. Like what one risk is, I think they've done a good job of publishing guidance as fast as is reasonable, given given a lot of this is new. Um, and but I think they're willing to kind of put themselves out there and say, here's what we think. Like, I'm very excited for the AI guidance that they've put on the slate for 2025, the draft AI guidance around the AI total life cycle process.
Yeah,
But that would be a
yeah,
risk they're taking
totally
is
agree.
putting guidance out too quickly. Um, Also, just clearing, they cleared 1,000 devices. It's quite a few,
Yeah,
especially in the
yeah,
last
yeah. You
quarter.
definitely clear, and I haven't heard of like major issues with those devices. Like we haven't seen another Therac 25. At least like I haven't heard about um, large safety issues uh, from these devices. So maybe like the absence of hearing about it is like, well, it seems like they made the right decision or like the right balance. And also things like the PCCP, like they're maybe even trending in even more of a least burdensome direction. As time goes on, like maybe if we put this in time, like they had the PCCP came next, total life cycle guidance. It seems like they're going more like they're loosening more and like taking more risks, um, more regulated risks. Like I think they're looking at adverse events and saying, hey, like these are pretty safe device categories. We can trust more of the manufacturer, so we'll put out things like the PCCP guidance. We'll put out things like the total life cycle guidance, where it seems like they're heading in the direction where they can clear not just your device, but also your device process and also downstream your post-market process. And the whole point of that is to put more control into the hands of the manufacturers, trusting the manufacturers to do the right thing so that FDA can focus their efforts on creating better guidance documents and on giving more attention to like the higher risk devices. So yeah, like it certainly seems like these are the initiatives at FDA that is moving more. I don't say there's lack of regulate or there's like too much regulation. There's under regulation, and then when it's just right, right?
It's
Just right regulation.
the,
Um,
the mean between the vices. I like always,
yeah,
it's for the audience. I'll always
yeah,
going back to virtue is the habit of picking the golden mean between vices. But I mean, I don't know. That's a little different, but it's always interesting how many things are like that in life, where it's finding the right balance. Um,
yeah.
but it is
And
a
if it's,
oh good.
sorry, go ahead.
Well, a
I'm
slight
just gonna use, I was just gonna use this physics analogy. It's like if you had a ball, um, where would the ball roll if you didn't have any outside forces? I think, and I think this is not just true for FDA, but for any, um, or at least I've seen this happen in like regulatory departments across clients. Like they tend to start out uh, less conservative, and then as things happen, it'll like ratchet up the level of the kind of level of the level of conservatism, and it like I think the natural flow of things is from this high potential energy down to the low, which is like from under to over regulation. I think that's like the natural flow state, and like these things here, like it's much easier to add a new SOP than it is to remove it. You know, it's like that takes a lot more of a concerted effort, and it takes a lot of risk taking. So like I'd say these are like moving up that level. Um, anyway, uh, yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I know we've seen it with ourselves in our QMS where we have a project and things usually go really well, but sometimes things don't go well. And then you add a new control, and then if you keep doing that
right,
indefinitely, you just get more and more controls before long. It's just unwieldy.
yeah,
And it's not that there weren't good intentions behind each one you added. It's just when you sum them all up, it starts to get out of hand. And yeah, I think that can happen
yeah.
in the federal government too, for sure. But I wanted to a little bit of an aside is to say, the FDA has cleared 1,000 devices, and like you said, I'm also not aware of any major like deaths or serious events, adverse events. But um, do you think it's possible it's just because the devices aren't being used that much, right? Like a lot of the devices that are
Mm.
cleared are
Hmm.
are like there's 1,000 devices that are cleared, but a way fewer are routinely being used in clinical practice. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean it's yeah that, and also like are the adverse events just being not reported? Is like another thing too. No, that's certainly a good question. Um, so yeah, like if it goes back to our definitions, um, that would kind of go on to benefit risk, right? Or I guess like that's like the ultimate, like the KPIs, like we maximize the good and reduce the harm. But if we can't even measure the good and harm accurately, then perhaps that should be the question. And I believe FDA is moving to asking that question. There's a lot of emphasis on post-market surveillance for these AI algorithms and ensuring that like data drift doesn't adversely impact. Um, so I think I think FDA is trying to answer those questions, or trying to improve its ability to detect adverse events and like react to them. Um, is yeah, like as far as my interactions with the agency, it seems like there's a lot of emphasis on the post market. Um, so perhaps they see that as well, and they're trying to add more post market surveillance, in order to know how much is this really being used in the clinic, and how much is it being underreported, if there are any adverse events.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's
Yeah.
see. Yeah, let's like switch over to some questions. Unless David, you had anything else
No,
specific to
no.
add? I was
Yeah, I'm sure we could keep chatting for a while, but yeah, let's switch over to some questions.
all right. So yeah, we have a question from sorry, Fetim. I'm very sorry if I mispronounced your name. Are you going to put a perspective of the FDA work in regulating AI to the EU also?
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Well,
no, Dave,
I was gonna say for
you have any
myself,
thoughts on that?
at Analytics, we really focus on the US FDA, and so we do occasionally work on projects that for CE marking, but I personally have a lot less experience and don't fully keep up with what's going on in the EU. So I don't feel like I could speak to that.
Yeah, sorry, I have the same I kind of have the same bias there. Um, question from Angela. What is the best regulatory pathway to follow if I already have an SaMD cleared by FDA, which is a digital surgical planning, and we're going to add additional AI tools? So yeah, that's a great question. And this definitely comes up a lot. Like adding new types of AI indications could be done as a separate software as a medical device. This has especially been true for our clients that already have a hardware device and they want to add AI to it. Um, one example that comes to mind is the Apple Watch series. Like I believe they have two SaMD AI indications that were each cleared as a separate SaMD. Um, that's definitely a pathway worth looking into. The advantages of it is it could result in a more lightweight application, but also it would decouple your main SaMD that doesn't have AI and the AI SaMD, because probably the AI one is going to change a lot more. Like you can do retraining. If you want to add like a PCCP to it, then you can do it on the SaMD application. Um, and also it would focus the conversation on the AI performance and not on all of the plumbing and all of the all of the infrastructure work that you've already gotten cleared for. So yeah, that'd be my suggestion there.
And a few 2 cents to add to that is I would certainly say it depends on how the AI tools are integrated with the surgical planning, and especially at the user interface level. If the two are tightly coupled, in my experience, it can be very difficult to split them apart cleanly, because if you are going to split apart the AI tools, the interface between the kind of the existing software that's already cleared and those modular 510Ks or submissions that you're doing on top of it needs to be well defined, and you need to have configuration management where you can kind of version control the tools separately and clearly understand how data is moving between the two layers. And if they're tightly coupled at the user interface layer, that can be very challenging to do or even impossible in some cases. So I'd say it definitely depends, but if it's possible, that can be a really good strategy.
Yeah, that's a great point. That you may need to re-architect how the software works for your already cleared product in order to properly do this concept of having a separate SaMD. Because you kind of have to treat the two sort of at arm's length, like the new AI SaMD. In theory should be able to communicate to not just your device, but speak some sort of common language to DICOM or other common formats that's a bit more generic. Uh, but it could require some software architecting and kind of restructuring on that. So definitely, I would definitely recommend to get your software engineering department involved in those conversations. The regulatory strategy, business strategy, and the software architecture definitely have a lot of interplays. in that. So, all right. Yes, we have a question from Guillaume. Thank you, Guillaume. Yeah, it's nice to see you. So Guillaume's asking, is FDA going to push companies to adopt 1345 standard in the future, and what would the impact for medical devices be? So I guess, yeah, we can try to answer that one first. Like, I know that FDA is trying to harmonize ISO 1345
And
and move away from the current QSR.
yeah,
Um,
I would say in that regulation is finalized and they are doing it. So there's a few things that are left regulations that are specific to the US. But yeah, I think it's probably in like a year and a half, companies will, I forget the dates. It's like a year and a half, companies will have to start following ISO 1345. And like, yeah, QSMR instead is what they're calling it. So sorry to
cool.
interject you, John, but yeah.
No, thanks, David. The next question, what about the impact of AI in risk analysis, such as 14971, for example? Yeah, so like on the topic of risk analysis, like I don't think that AI really changes the framework, at least in my mind, too much. It does add more risks, add different types of risks, like especially with like the new new wave of AI coming out that uses foundational models and like LLMs and stuff. But like conceptually, I think 14971 still holds in that you have different sequences of events. Some of these links in the chain could contain AI that either misbehaves for some reason, that outputs the incorrect results, that fails to work at all. But like conceptually, it's still the same, like it still has four legs. It's just maybe has different hair or something, but it's still the same thing. Um, you just have to add some more failure modes. I think really that's what it kind of boils down to, like failure modes of how can AI fail differently, and especially the new wave of AI coming through, and applying that to your risk assessment.
And the other
Um,
thing I would add is check out AAMI-TIR 34971, which is a consensus report on applying AI risk management to or integrating AI risk management within ISO 14971. That's worth taking a look at.
right.
But I agree with everything you're saying, Yujan.
How about the last one? Finally, is ISO or IEC 6304 adapted to AI for lifecycle software management? David, you want to take this one?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I would say no, it's not. I think there's a lot of unique things for AI lifecycle management that aren't covered in IEC 6304. And I think there's a whole bunch of standards that are in the works on that. None of them seem to be gaining adoption. Actually, Yujan and I were both at the AdvaMed conference last week, and Troy at the I'm forgetting his last name, but the head of the Digital Health Center of Excellence was saying, hey, we don't see industry leaning towards any particular AI standard. That's been our feeling too, and I think the guidance document that's coming out next year should kind of present FDA's take on AI lifecycle management. So I think it like in the cybersecurity space, ISO 81001-5-1 is the standard that really seems like industries coalesce around, and that's kind of the equivalent to 6304 in the cybersecurity space. Hopefully, there will be a standard like that in the AI space, but it doesn't seem like we're there yet. So
Gotcha.
anyway, those are my thoughts on that one. But
The next question, yeah, under what conditions is a change considered minor enough that a new submission is not needed? For instance, retraining the AI model or updating the patch level for cybersecurity. So for retraining the AI model, yeah, I guess kind of step back. Yeah, there's a guidance document that goes into note to file or not to file, or no, uh, not to file or letter to file. I'm just saying it completely wrong. But anyway, there's a guidance that goes into that, and I think it boils down to your interpretation of what a significant change is. Um, for retraining the AI model, um, like it's kind of nebulous on this. I'm it's my opinion that's okay to do as a note to file, but there's a PCCP that you can do now, and there's a great example of a PCCP that was submitted. I think it was by Overjet that was submitted that specifically just for retraining. That could be worth looking into. Um, and yeah, for cybersecurity, David, you want to speak to that one?
Sure. Can I real quick before moving on to the cybersecurity part? Yeah, I'd echo what you're saying, and it kind of depends on your risk tolerance. And I think the larger companies will be more sensitive and will probably use PCCPs and for that. But in a lot of cases, yeah, I don't think it's necessary. I'd also really quickly on our website, hopefully you guys can see our screen. We recently had a 10x talk on this topic that may be worth taking a look at. And it also includes links to the 2 FDA guidance documents on this subject. And it is nebulous, but I think we kind of talk about some specific situations, and we got the transcript in here, so you may want to take a look at that. On cybersecurity, certainly any updates that patch vulnerabilities, FDA is very clear you don't need to do a submission for that. I think, yeah, certainly there are situations where if you're like doing large refactors of the code base that shift things around a lot, maybe depending on how conservative you want to be, you may want to submit for that. But I would say I think in most cases for cybersecurity related changes, you would not need another submission. But it's hard to say without knowing the specifics.
Yep, certainly. And yeah, like it's just really complicated. I kind of understand why FDA left the guidance as pretty open-ended, is because like there's just a lot of edge cases and in cases that like really case by case basis that would have to be done. I would really recommend if you read that guidance, start from the examples that they give at the bottom, and that would help you calibrate what FDA thinks is, quote, a significant change versus not. I found the examples for guidance documents, like in general, like that's the first thing I read. Like I usually read guidance documents from the bottom up. Like I read the examples first, and that just frames my mind and like what is the calibration level for what is FDA considers a significant change or not. And usually the examples are what helps to form that level. Okay, next question. I have a question in terms of validation. One of the characteristics of AI is learning and consequently improving outcomes. So how do we handle validations? Would using PMS data be a solution? Post-market surveillance data. I think that's what PMS. Um,
It's not clear to me, are they asking about models that update, like that are doing online learning or adaptive, or
let's kind of talk about both cases. So yeah, if it's a non-adaptive model, which what that means is you have your model that's trained and you run V&V on it and the weights are frozen, and that model will then get deployed. And in that case, that algorithm is not being updated in the field. So typically for a validation like that, like you'd use V&V and data that you had present there. And um, and FDA is okay with you reusing that validation data sparingly. Like I wouldn't I definitely wouldn't let your dev team have access to it in an easy way so that they can use it every single day, because inadvertently you could end up overfitting to that data set, and then you have to collect new data set and re-annotate it, and we all know how expensive that is. The question, yeah, I don't know, David, do you have anything to add on the frozen one? Yeah, it's kind of our stance there is like post-market data is good and you should monitor. If anything, just for your customer experience, just know how well is it really working, and are your customers going to renew your subscription? If it's not performing well, then yeah, I think that's the problem. But for the continuous AI, like the ones that retrain themselves out in the field, um, I think a PCCP, in my opinion, is required for something like this. Or highly recommend a PCCP for something like this, because you will be making changes so frequently, and a lot of these changes you're probably not going to bring it back even and run like V&V on them. And even if you did, like I think that would really quickly cause you to start overfitting to your test set. And so I think using pre-market or using post-market surveillance data could be a solution for that. And the benefits of that is that the post-market data that clearly captures like your intended use audience, right? Like in the pre-market, sometimes you need to make guesses about what your intended use data set looks like. It has to somewhat match the U.S. Census data, and also match like the patient demographic distribution, and you can also enrich with some cases. But the nice thing about the post-market surveillance data is it is what your device is being used for. So I think it is valid to use a post-market surveillance data. Yeah, anything you want to add to that, David?
Yeah, one thing I'd add is anyone working in this area with adaptive algorithms, there's FDA published this paper that was a couple years ago on this topic on the reuse of test data sets. And in particular, when do you start overfitting if you're just testing continuously against the same set for an adaptive algorithm? So anyway, it's been a while since I read it, but I think it's an interesting paper to take a look at.
Cool. All right, next question. Tim, can the same acquired clinical data for product performance evaluation be reused for a different version without significant changes in another 510(k) application, or will new data be required in any case? Yeah, so this touches on what we talked about. And the answer is yes. You can reuse it, but just be aware of the fact that the phenomenon where you can inadvertently start to overfit on your test data set, even if you are taking great care to make sure that you don't pollute your training set. Like that can still happen. I kind of in my personal experience, when I train AI, like 100 times is I was like doing the test validation, like the train validation test loop. If you do that 1,000 times, you're probably gonna end up just overfitting to that test set. You want to do it as few times as possible, preferably just once per release.
Yeah, and I would add that we would really recommend, as part of your AI lifecycle processes, having separation between the engineers developing the model and the test data set, and making sure they don't have access to, so that right? Because if they do have access, there's the temptation, especially if you're pushing for improving the performance, to be testing it a lot, right? So it's much better to have it isolated and to have a log where you capture, here's the exact version we ran it on, here's why we're running it again, and have a very controlled process around that. Because certainly FDA recognizes, and they explicitly state in some of their radiology specific guidance that they recognize that developing test data is expensive. But it's possible if they ask, like, well, hey, how many times have you done this? If you just say, oh, we don't know, or like you could run into difficulties. I think having controls
Mhm.
around the data and having a log of here's when people have used it would be really helpful in that situation. And I also strongly suspect in the AI lifecycle guidance that's coming out in 2025 that will be one of the topics they discuss in more detail. So, yeah.
Um, and yeah, like maybe one more data point to this. So there's this machine learning competition called Kaggle, where Kaggle will release a problem and they'll take and anyone can submit their responses to these various machine learning algorithm challenges, like you might have a segmentation challenge. And the Kaggle has a concept of a public leaderboard and a private leaderboard. Public leaderboard, as it sounds like, you know your results instantly um, of your test set. You don't know the test set, like the test set that they give you, or like you don't have access to that, but you just know the result. And if you run it too many times, what you'll find is that the teams that are highest on that public leaderboard actually are not the winners in the private leaderboard because they have overfit to the public leaderboard without even knowing it. It's just like these machine learning algorithms are so powerful that any feedback that you give it from the final result with a large enough neural network, you will eventually overfit that with like enough trial and errors. Um, so anyway, that was just a minor aside. Question from Cooper. How's it going, man? Nice to see you. How does FDA feel about continuous learning algorithms? Are there additional regulatory burdens for such algorithms? And I'd assume they want even more comprehensive post-market surveillance. Uh, yes to all of those. I believe I'm not sure what continuous learning algorithms have actually been released. Like I'm not actually sure if I've read one that has been released. I think the PCCP, one of the reasons for that, in addition to the antibiotic susceptibility testing use cases, I think one of the reasons of it was to enable the continuous learning algorithms, whereas before there wasn't really a clear way to do that other than just a note to file. Um, but I definitely agree that they would want more post-market surveillance in that. Admittedly, I haven't really built or deployed one of these. I suspect there's business considerations. Like I think that the market um doesn't really care for it, or like it's relatively difficult to do from a business and like commercialization perspective, and like the upsides from the downstream marketability is not worth, like the juice is not worth the squeeze. And so a lot of sponsors would just rather take the path already taken instead of forging a new one. Yeah, that's my read on that. I'm not sure, David, if you've encountered any of these or done one yourself.
I haven't encountered any that do continuous or online learning, and I think you're right. I mean, I think from like if you're a hospital or an institution and you're installing one of these devices, you're going to do your own validation study, and I don't know. Maybe there probably are situations where it would be really beneficial to have the online learning, but yeah, I'd agree with what you're saying, you John. It seems like there's some real downsides from a business standpoint, even beyond the issues with the FDA.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Or I agree by definition because because I said it, but yeah, I think
Yes.
the business dynamic is probably the reason why we haven't seen more of it. It's just not worth the extra risk and not worth the extra complexity. Thing. Another question: should a PCCP for continuous learning model be open-ended, saying it will constantly learn, or should there be a defined timeline? Um, I believe in the PCCP guidance. That's left up to you, but you do need to define like when you run verification. And it could be done automatically. Yeah, I'm not sure like the best. Yeah, I'm not sure actually. I'll have to think more about this one, but I don't think there is like a strict you have to do it like a monthly release or something like that. Like I think you could design a PCCP for it to happen nightly. I mean, like you'll obviously have to have some release cadence. Like I don't know if you really want to train and deploy like in like a microsecond loop. I'm not sure of that, but like you'll probably have something. You know, is it a day? Is it a week? Is it a month? Um, I think the answer for that is not from a regulatory perspective, but maybe more from like technical machine learning operations, and also market need as well. That perspective, risk too. Cooper was asking David, please share the link to the paper that you just shared. Um, David, if you could post it in the comments or just give it to me, I'll post it in the comments. All right, so we got a couple more questions. Angela, I have another question. Thank you. Do you think it is possible to do a letter to file in case we use a SaMD cleared by FDA and we're going to use it with our software for surgical planning? Or do we need a traditional or special 510K? That depends on how your intended use is written. If your intended use was written in a more generic way and you got clearance for that, then I think you can start going down the path of is this a letter to file or not. But if it's adding a new intended use, or it's adding a new statement or changing the intended use, that's almost certainly a traditional 510K. Special 510K, as I understand, like you still can't change your intended use, but it's a more safer path than a letter to file. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. That one. And then Alex asked, what are specific regulatory pathways for IVD in the US? Yeah, David, do
Sure.
you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, I don't, we do some work in the IVD space, but usually our role is more focused on the software. There's a lot of aspects to IVDs like that we're typically not involved with. We have some partners in that space that do really great work. Was going to say, I am not aware of any specific pathways for IVDs. I don't believe there's anything particular there, but I'm not 100% sure, to be honest.
Oh, and we have one final question from Richie. Yes, there was a curious paper in April 2023 on the barriers implementation of AI in healthcare, and also anecdotal evidence to back it up. What are your observations about adoption of AI ML SaMDs in the US market in terms of what you're seeing with your clients? And have you seen any industry data around this? Um,
So I haven't seen any hard data, or I don't remember off the top of my head, but my feeling is absolutely there's a lot of devices being cleared that aren't valuable to the clinicians, and the people making the devices are usually too focused on the technology and not enough on understanding the problem and the clinical workflow and all the issues installing in hospitals and all of that. So yeah, we have a few articles on our website on this topic as well that you might want to take a look at. But yeah, hard data, I'm not sure.
Yeah, yeah, I have like anecdotal data. Just some of my close contacts that we kind of discuss their current usage of AI in practice. And it's pretty much exactly what David said. I don't know if there's any uh, applications where like yeah, like radiologists would be very upset if those were removed from them. Usually, like the purchasing decisions that were made, at least how it works in the U.S. healthcare system, the people purchasing the software are not the same ones using the software. So there's also some of that going on. So maybe if we look at sales numbers from the AI companies, that might not capture the exact value or like the perceived value of it. Certainly, though, like the market seems very strong. It like uh, seems like there's more booths at RSNA every year for AI, and that trend has kind of continued, or it has been true even with downturns in the market stuff. So there's clearly a lot of investment potential. Now, exactly how that turns into value, and how that value flows up the chain, um, yeah, I think that's still an open question for me. So, uh, yeah, I don't think I can really.
One other thing, I do think this is kind of widely recognized as a problem. And just this is a day or two ago, I saw this AI doc and NVIDIA have a partnership establishing a blueprint for resilient integration and deployment of guided excellence. I, that gains accelerate AI adoption. Now, I don't know what this is going to be, but I signed up for it, so we'll see, I guess. But I do think it's a understood problem that there's the adoptions not keeping up with the FDA clearance. And I think some of it might be on the reimbursement side. I'm actually going to be in a webinar with one of our friends, Ryan Nolan, talking about reimbursement. Yeah, I can post a link to that as well. But my understanding from talking to him is that there's challenges on the reimbursement side, even beyond just how well the devices are working.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, like just making uh like just making the radiologist faster or more accurate is not going to guarantee you sales. Like you have to have some other ROI value proposition for your customers, especially in the States where we have a multi-payer system. Those incentives may be kind of strange. At least I've had clients that have come from Europe where there's a single payer system, and usually the incentives of the healthcare system are more aligned to saving costs and driving better care. But in the US, the fee for service system, those incentives are not always aligned. So sometimes you have to get a little bit creative on your value proposition, um, and link that back to your technology. Ideally, you'd start with your value proposition and then build something. But a lot of times, what happens is you'll build something, and then now you need to find the right market for it. So, last question, uh, Alex, what are the main cybersecurity threats facing medical devices, and how can they be mitigated? David,
Yeah,
you want to take that one?
yeah, sure. That's a good question. So I think malware threats is the big one that you see the hospitals worrying about. Um, but I think you'd have to get a lot more specific to be more useful. So, we deal with a lot of cloud applications, um, and a lot of especially radiology cloud applications, and I think it's a lot of the usual things that you see, like making sure all your dependencies are updated, making sure your authentication is set up properly, your cloud deployments configured properly. It's good to have a mechanism to monitor for vulnerability or for exploits. So using something like AWS Guard Duty, um, like leaking PHI into log files. Yeah. Sorry, I should have a better answer to this, but a more systematic answer to this. But yeah, hopefully that's at least a
Yeah,
little
that's good.
helpful. But I'd be happy to continue chatting more about that offline, because I think I have a lot more to say if I'd sit down and think about it carefully. But
Yeah, we've also heard about like attacks where the firmware update mechanism was compromised, um, and that led to compromised code being run. Um, like I believe that's what may have kicked off some of the more recent cybersecurity concerns from FDA. I'm not sure, but yeah, and how can they be mitigated? I think that's a full discussion on its own. And unfortunately, we're at time. So
maybe
it
we
was
can make
nice
that a
having.
topic for next week, or yeah.
Yeah. That sounds great. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks for joining, and hope you have a great rest of your day. And yeah, keep inventing new devices. Keep it safe and effective, and only make devices that you feel comfortable using on yourself and your loved ones. And as long as you do that, be pragmatic. So, all right. Talk to y'all later.
Thanks, everyone.